Today, I want to talk about something that might be driving your stress levels through the roof without you even realizing it. It's not your workload, it's not your boss, it's your perfectionism. You see, many of us wear perfectionism like a badge of honor. We think it means we have high standards, that we're committed to excellence. But here's what nobody tells you: perfectionism isn't about excellence at all. It's a stress response that's quietly sabotaging your progress, your mental health, and ironically, the very quality of work you're trying to achieve. In the next few minutes, I'm going to break down exactly how your pursuit of perfection is creating chronic stress in your life. And more importantly, I'll give you practical strategies to channel that drive for excellence in a way that actually works. Let's dive in. What is perfectionism? Before we can address how perfectionism causes stress, we need to understand what it actually is. At its core, perfectionism is the belief that anything short of flawless is unacceptable. It's the tendency to regard anything less than perfect as a failure. Now, this might sound like having high standards, but there's a critical difference. High standards are about striving for excellence while accepting that mistakes are part of growth. Perfectionism, on the other hand, is about avoiding imperfection at all costs. Research shows there are actually two main types of perfectionism, and understanding which one you're dealing with is crucial. The first is self-oriented perfectionism. This is when you hold extremely high personal standards for yourself and base your self-worth on meeting those standards. It stems from a need for control and a deep fear of failure. You're your own harshest critic, and no achievement ever feels quite good enough. The second type is socially prescribed perfectionism. This is when you perceive that significant others in your life, whether that's your boss, your colleagues, or even society at large, have unrealistic standards that you must meet. You believe that others will not approve of you or accept you unless everything you do is perfect. This creates constant pressure to meet expectations that may not even be real. Both forms involve unrealistic expectations and harsh self-criticism when mistakes inevitably happen. Perfectionists continuously strive to avoid any imperfection and are reluctant to finalize tasks unless they're convinced everything is absolutely flawless. While perfectionism springs from a genuine desire to excel, it creates significant psychological distress and actually undermines your ability to enjoy your achievements. You're constantly worrying about making mistakes and facing criticism, and this takes a serious mental and emotional toll. Here's the reality: perfectionism simply isn't realistic or sustainable in the complex, unpredictable world we operate in today. The stress connection. So, how exactly does perfectionism translate into chronic stress? Let me break down the specific ways this happens. First, there's the paralysis effect. The fear of failure and making mistakes causes what we call analysis paralysis. You spend too long deliberating over options before starting a task because you're trying to minimize any risk of errors. This stalls your progress and causes you to miss important deadlines, which then creates even more stress. Then there's procrastination. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but perfectionists are often chronic procrastinators. Why? Because the inability to tolerate imperfection leads you to leave tasks unfinished or only partially complete. Subconsciously, you'd rather have the excuse of something being incomplete than face the criticism that might come with a failed attempt. This procrastination creates a vicious cycle of stress as deadlines approach and work piles up. Perfectionism also severely limits your creativity. When you're fixated on rules and templates, you hamper the kind of original thinking that requires experimentation. Perfectionists are reluctant to embrace novel solutions. that might involve elements of trial and error. Your mindset prioritizes replication over ingenuity, which means you're constantly playing it safe instead of innovating. This creates stress because you know you're not performing at your full creative potential. There's also the people-pleasing aspect. When you believe your worth depends on meeting others' expectations, you're constantly seeking reassurance and validation. This undermines your confidence and dilutes your authentic presence as a leader or professional. Your attention is directed externally rather than building internal self-trust, which is exhausting and stressful. Perhaps most damaging is how perfectionism robs you of enjoyment. Through harsh self-criticism, you fail to appreciate your accomplishments. You're seldom satisfied or able to savor successes because you're intensely focused on perceived shortcomings rather than strengths. This constant dissatisfaction takes a significant mental toll and diminishes your overall quality of life. You're running on a treadmill that never stops, never reaching a destination where you can feel genuinely good about what you've achieved. That's not sustainable, and it's a direct path to burnout and chronic stress. How perfectionism damages your health. Now let's talk about what perfectionism is doing to your body and mind beyond just the stress you feel. The connection between perfectionism and mental health is well documented, and it's more serious than most people realize. When you're constantly striving for an impossible standard, your body stays in a state of heightened alert. Your stress hormones remain elevated, which over time can lead to anxiety disorders and depression. Studies have shown that perfectionists experience significantly higher rates of anxiety compared to non-perfectionists. This makes sense when you think about it. If you're constantly worried about making mistakes, constantly second-guessing your decisions, and constantly feeling like you're not measuring up, your nervous system never gets a chance to relax. You're living in a perpetual state of fight or flight, and that takes a toll. Depression is another common outcome of chronic perfectionism. When you base your self-worth entirely on achievement and flawless performance, every setback feels like a personal failure. You're never good enough in your own eyes, and that constant self-criticism creates a negative internal dialogue that can spiral into clinical depression. The harsh judgment you direct at yourself becomes the lens through which you view everything in your life. But the damage doesn't stop with your mental health. Perfectionism affects your physical health too. Chronic stress from perfectionism has been linked to cardiovascular problems, weakened immune function, and digestive issues. When your body is constantly flooded with stress hormones like cortisol, it can't perform its normal maintenance and repair functions effectively. You might notice you're getting sick more often, or that minor health issues seem to linger longer than they should. Sleep is another casualty of perfectionism. Many perfectionists struggle with insomnia because their minds won't shut off at night. You're lying in bed, replaying the day's events, analysing what you could have done better, worrying about tomorrow's tasks, and feeling anxious about all the ways things might go wrong. This lack of quality sleep then creates a vicious cycle, because when you're sleep deprived, your ability to regulate emotions and manage stress is even more compromised. Your relationships suffer too. Perfectionism doesn't just affect how you treat yourself, it affects how you interact with others. You might find yourself being overly critical of colleagues or family members, projecting your impossibly high standards onto them. Or you might withdraw from relationships altogether because you're too exhausted from maintaining your perfect facade to invest in meaningful connections. Either way, the isolation that results adds another layer of stress to your life. Breaking free from perfectionism. Here's the good news. You don't have to eliminate your drive for excellence. What you need to do is redirect it in a healthier, more sustainable way. Let me give you some practical strategies that you can start implementing today. First, shift from outcome-focused goals to process-focused goals. Instead of setting a goal like deliver a perfect presentation, Set a goal like practice my presentation 3 times and gather feedback from 2 colleagues. This change might seem small, but it's powerful. Process goals, reduce anxiety over external approval, and put the emphasis on learning and growth through small, achievable wins. You're measuring success by the effort and behaviors you can control, not by an abstract standard of perfection that's impossible to define. Second, embrace what I call the good enough principle. This isn't about lowering your standards, it's about understanding the law of diminishing returns. Often, 90% completion delivered on time holds far more value than a perfect result delivered late. After you've done 2 rounds of revision on a project, trust that your work is good enough and move forward. Get feedback from others instead of endlessly tweaking it yourself. Early feedback allows for course correction and often leads to a better final product than perfectionism ever could. Practice self-compassion when mistakes happen. This is crucial. When you make an error, your self-talk should acknowledge the learning opportunity and focus on next steps rather than magnifying the flaw. Treat yourself the way you would treat a good friend who made the same mistake. You wouldn't berate them endlessly, so why do it to yourself? Self-esteem should depend more on effort and growth than on flawless performance. Challenge your all or nothing thinking. Perfectionists tend to see tasks on a binary scale, perfect or failure, but reality exists on a continuum. Most work involves a mix of strengths and areas to improve. Start practicing positive self-talk that acknowledges progress made and lessons learned rather than obsessing over missed standards. When you catch yourself thinking, this is terrible because it's not perfect, stop and reframe. This is good work with room to grow. Learn to view mistakes not as signs of failure, but as feedback to enhance your skills over time through experimentation. A growth mindset understands that ability increases with experience gained from imperfect attempts. Every mistake is data that helps you improve. The most successful people aren't those who never fail. They're the ones who fail forward, learning and adapting as they go. Finally, limit your revising and editing. Constant reworking is inefficient and overlooks the reality of diminishing returns. Set a boundary for yourself. After a specific number of revisions, force yourself to consider the work complete and seek outside input. Moving forward and getting fresh perspectives will help you improve the next version far more than perfecting the current one ever could. Conclusion. So here's what I want you to remember. Perfectionism isn't the path to excellence. It's actually the obstacle standing in your way. The stress it creates doesn't make you better at what you do. It makes you less effective, less creative, and less healthy. By shifting your focus from perfect outcomes to meaningful progress, by embracing good enough and practicing self-compassion, you can channel your drive for excellence in a way that actually serves you. This week, I want you to identify one task you've been procrastinating on because you're worried it won't be perfect. Commit to delivering the good enough version. See what happens when you prioritize progress over perfection. You might be surprised at how much better you feel and how much more you accomplish.